If it's Friday, voters in battleground Florida head to the polls next week. The two Democrats hoping to take on Governor DeSantis, who's also a possible 2024 candidate, will both be here in a moment. Plus, the extreme drought that's draining the country's reservoirs. As natural resources dry up, states are haggling with each other over water, with some saying their neighbors aren't cutting back enough. And going nuclear, Ukraine and Russia are accusing each other of planning a false flag attack at a nuclear plant on the front lines of the war, as Ukraine confirms their saboteurs were involved in recent attacks on Russian military sites. Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Chuck Todd. Florida, Florida, Florida. It's still how we refer to the state around here because it's still a swing state, even if neither party has been treating it that way lately. Politically, all eyes have been on Florida these past 2 weeks, not for politics, but after the FBI's search of former President Trump's Mar-a-Lago home in Palm Beach County. But next week, the spotlight in Florida will be on current elected officials and candidates when the Sunshine State holds its August primaries. Senator Marco Rubio and his presumed Democratic challenger Val Demings are also on the ballot, but there's not really any primary action in either one of those races. But boy, are they perhaps the most evenly matched pair of Senate candidates in the country that we'll be watching in November. But the action for this week is in the gubernatorial primaries, where we will find out which Democrat, either Charlie Crist or Nikki Fried, will take on Republican Governor Ron DeSantis. I'm going to talk to both of the Democrats in just a moment. But while the former president's name is not on the ballot, that doesn't mean his presence doesn't have an impact. Most former presidents tend to fade into the background after leaving the White House. But as we've said time and again, Trump is not most former presidents. And arguably the two politicians who've benefited the most from Donald Trump's presence and continued presence are one, President Biden, and two, Governor DeSantis. Where would either be without Donald Trump's existence? As you've probably heard President Biden say, hey, don't compare me to the almighty, compare me to the alternative. Biden's always enjoyed his most success when he gets to be seen as a Trump alternative. His polls were highest, for instance, most right after January 6th. And with constant chaotic headlines about Trump's legal issues and possible criminal behavior, President Biden has had one of the most successful months in office. Some say Trump is stepping on it. Others might argue Trump's presence actually allows Biden to do what he's been doing. For many voters, it's turned these midterms into a choice between, say, Team Biden and Team Trump, instead of a referendum on just the current administration. And right now, that's to the delight or relief, if you will, of many Democrats. As for Governor DeSantis, with Trump's continued presence, he too gets the benefit from being a Trump alternative, somebody Trump skeptics can rally around and pro-Trumpers can rally around. And he's getting to expand his national brand. For instance, today, DeSantis is stumping for candidates in Ohio and Pennsylvania, and he's positioning himself as the more palatable but still Trump-aligned standard bearer for the Republicans. DeSantis and Trump themselves have been uneasy allies this year, as the Florida governor has been less deferential to the former president than some of the other 2024 hopefuls, but he's still somewhat deferential. And before we get to 2024, DeSantis still does have to face voters in Florida this November. He's expected to win, but keep this in mind. No governor has won an election in the state of Florida by more than 2 percentage points since 2006. By the way, that person who won it in 2006 was then Republican Charlie Crist. While Trump's presence boosts them now, both Biden and DeSantis will eventually need to overcome Trump to continue their political careers in a post-Trump era. So let's get into the gubernatorial race in 2022. Joining me now is the Florida Agricultural Commissioner, Nikki Fried. She is one of the Democrats looking to take on Ron DeSantis this November, and the only elected statewide Democrat from 2018. Commissioner Fried, thanks for coming on and spending a few minutes with us.
Well, thanks for having me on today.
Let me just start with this. Why you and not Charlie Crist to take on Ron DeSantis?
Well, this really is a very easy decision for Democrats here in the state of Florida. Democrats are looking for a winner, somebody who's been able to win our state as a Democrat. And as you just heard, I'm the only one who's been able to do that since 2012, when Barack Obama took our state. The other thing that Democrats are looking for is that champion, that fighter for those issues. And as our only statewide elected Democrat, I have been in the trenches fighting against Ron DeSantis for 3.5 years. And Democrats are talking about two fundamental issues right now. One is the unaffordability in our state, and two, that women's right to choose. And as the only one in this race, both in primary and the general election, I'm the only one who has been 100% pro-choice. I've stood up every single time. And unfortunately, in this very fundamental time in our society, in our state, and in our government, Charlie Crist has been on the other side of almost every single issue, including a women's right to choose. He still to this day calls himself pro-life, has flopped on this issue back and forth, and women can't trust him. So if we're going to actually be able to pull aside and pull away Republican women votes, independent women votes, it has got to be a female, especially one who has been a staunch supporter of pro-choice and the biggest advocate for our issues.
All right, let me ask you this. You make a compelling case about your Democratic credentials. Why has that not... Look, endorsements don't decide primaries, voters do. I'm well aware of that, so I want to take that talking point away from you. But why do Democrats who know both of you, more of them have picked Crist than you in endorsements, more have given money to him than you? Why is that? Because you make a compelling case of saying, hey, pick me, not him. I'm more consistent. But Democrats are picking him right now, at least in the elected space.
It is actually very easy. I have never been an establishment candidate. I only came involved in politics in 3.5 years, first time I've ever been elected. Charlie's been doing this for 30 years as a Republican, as an independent, and as a Democrat. So he has a lot of chips to cash in. And I have been every single day talking to the voters, talking to the people. I haven't sought out the establishment support, the establishment vote, but I've been our standard bearer. And the Democratic people on the ground, the grassroots, is why I've been endorsed by the Democratic Black Caucus, the Democratic Environmental Caucus, the Young Democrats, the LGBTQ caucuses all across our state. The grassroots people who are actually out there every single day fighting on these issues, those people are with me, which is why we're seeing a Nikki surge, Nikki wave. The people are feeling momentum, they're feeling the inspiration, and they're wanting something new. The establishment hasn't been winning in the state of Florida. You can see that 28 straight years. And I think even you have been the one who said that Charlie Crist's resume is probably the worst resume to go up against Ron DeSantis.
Let me ask you this, though. The case you make against Charlie Crist is, look, he's been on this side of the abortion issue and all this stuff. There's a lot of moderate voters in Florida who are very in the middle of the road when it comes to cultural issues, and may actually look at Charlie Crist and say, hey, that's me. In 2006, I thought I was a Republican. I don't like this Republican Party, and neither did he. That's not a flip-flopper. That's somebody who's simply been paying attention. What do you say to that voter who may find that appealing?
First of all, we all know that Charlie didn't leave the Republican Party because he saw the light. He saw the polls. He was losing against Marco Rubio in the Republican primary for the U.S. Senate seat. And at the end of the day, in 2014, when he ran as governor in the Democratic Party, he lost to Rick Scott. At that time, Rick's unfavorability was through the roof. If he couldn't win against Rick Scott, pull those moderates, pull those individuals over, that didn't work. That's a false argument today. Where meanwhile, I have been in the trenches. Look, in 2018, I have received more crossover votes than any Democrat has ever received. We talked about issues that transcended partisan politics. And I have been a woman of my word, standing up for what we believe in, fighting on those issues. And what Ron DeSantis has been doing for 3.5 years is dividing our state, creating these cultural wars, and not focusing on the everyday people here on the ground. I make that compelling argument to Republicans. My dad's a Republican. Make those arguments to independents, and especially the women of our state that want to make sure that they've got somebody who's going to protect them and that right to privacy.
Let me ask you this. You said that Charlie Crist couldn't beat Rick Scott. Neither could Bill Nelson. He lost by less than a percentage point. Andrew Gillum lost by less than a percentage point. It does sometimes feel to Florida Democrats that, like, the football's right there and Lucy always yanks it away with a half a percentage point. But why do you think Andrew Gillum and Bill Nelson came up short? Why do you think Joe Biden came up short? What is it that what is the brick wall Democrats have been running into in Florida for that last 2 points?
Well, I think this is a two-part question. One is that Democrats have been running our campaigns wrong. We've been so focused on just turning out the blue areas, just making sure we're going to Broward County and South Florida and the Hillsborough County and the I-4 corridor. That is not enough for Democrats to be able to overcome the red part of our state. In 2018, we focused on 13 additional counties, making sure that we flipped 2 counties, Duval and Seminole, also made sure we lost by less in some of the other counties. That's what got us over almost a 20-point swing from my predecessor who won this seat in 2014 as a Republican. The other thing is that we've been so focused on the top of the ticket, whether it's the U.S. Senate seat, the governor's races, and not focusing on the down ballot races, our House, our Senate, our city and county commissioners, the ones that are doing the door knocking, the ones that are going out there, they don't have the resources. So that has been my commitment to the people of our state, that when I am our Democratic governor candidate, that we're going to make sure that the resources are going to the bottom of the ticket, that we're lifting everybody up, because that is the only way that we're going to do this. And we're going to go to the red areas because not only are there Democratic votes there, but we're going to have an opportunity to take Republican women and independent women along with the ride with us.
If you're governor, it's still likely there's going to be a Republican legislature. And I know you don't like the abortion law that's on the books, where it stops at 15 weeks. Are you willing to end up signing legislation that isn't what you want, but maybe improves things at the margins, because that's the best you can get out of a Republican legislature? I mean, I guess, how do you plan on improving access to abortion for voters with a Republican legislature?
Well, first of all, I have been working with the Republican legislature for 3.5 years. As our only statewide elected Democrat, I've been able to have extremely high success rates in not only getting my budget through the legislature, also legalizing hemp here in the state of Florida. And so I know that there's an opportunity to work across the aisles and to get things accomplished. But I also, the Republicans know that I'm not necessarily going to just sit back and let them run the show. I'm going to use the power of the veto pen. I'm going to use the power of calling special sessions. And they're going to figure out that it's a lot easier to work with me than to fight me every step along the way. And at the end of the day, I say this all the time too, that when you want to kill a snake, you cut off its head. And so when we take Ron DeSantis out of the conversation and out of the equation here, then the Republicans can go back to just being conservative, not this radicalization that we've seen here in the state of Florida and the Republican Party. And so I'm going to go to battle every single day for the things that we believe in, making sure that we're protecting women's right to choose, including having a new constitutional amendment going on the 2024 ballot to protect that right to privacy.
Nikki Fried, the Commissioner of Agriculture, which is a statewide elected official in Florida. Appreciate you coming on, sharing your perspective with us. Be safe on the trail.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me, Chuck.
Joining me now is the other top Democrat looking to take on Ron DeSantis this November. It's Florida Congressman and, yes, former Governor Charlie Crist. Congressman Crist, Governor Crist, I know nobody ever likes to give up that governor title. Is that fair?
No, it's a nice title, but just call me Charlie, Chuck. That's fine.
Let me start with the big point that she's trying to make against you, which is simply you've been on, particularly on guns and abortion, that you weren't on the right side of those issues when you were a Republican, and that you're pretty much a Democrat come lately on those issues. What do you say to her?
Well, let's talk about what I did as a Republican. So as a state senator, young state senator at that, I was on the healthcare committee, Chuck, and a vote came before our committee that was on a woman's right to choose. It was an anti-abortion bill. As a Republican state senator, I voted against it. It was going to require a 24-hour waiting period. So that's point one of my record. Number two, I'm the only candidate in this race that, as governor of Florida, even as a Republican, vetoed an anti-abortion bill. And as a member of the Congress for the past 6 years almost, have 100% rating by Planned Parenthood, 100% rating by NARAL, endorsed by the Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, on reproductive rights, endorsed by Alex Sink, who was our CFO when I was governor, and also a gubernatorial candidate, endorsed me on reproductive rights. The list goes on and on. Barbara DeVecchi, who used to be president of Planned Parenthood in Florida, endorsed my campaign over my primary opponent because they trust me. They know what I'm going to do. Even Anna Escamani, one of the most progressive members of the Florida House, endorsed me. Why are they all endorsing me? Because they trust me. They know what I've done. They know what my deeds are, as well as Debbie Wasserman Schultz. So I'm very comfortable with that. As it relates to guns, listen, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, finish that answer.
No, what I was going to say about guns, listen, I've been very clear about what I think we need to do. Listen, Florida has been stung by this gun issue, and it's incredibly sad. The Pulse nightclub, where I am right now in Central Florida, 49 angels lost their lives, mass killing with assault weapons. Same thing happened down in Parkland. And we've seen it happen recently in Buffalo, New York, in Texas, Highland Park, Illinois. We need to ban assault weapons. We need to have background checks that actually check backgrounds without loopholes, and have red flag laws, which I'm sponsoring in Congress right now, nationwide. I mean, we have a red flag law now in Florida, Chuck, as I'm sure you're aware, and that's a good thing. But what if somebody goes to Savannah, Georgia, they get a gun, maybe an assault weapon, in fact, come into North Florida and commit one of these horrific crimes? So it has to be a nationwide red flag law in order to make America and Florida more safe for our children.
Let's talk about who would provide the tougher test for Governor DeSantis. There's been quite a few Republican strategists who've been whispering that they think it's easier to run against you than her, simply because your resume is very long. That forget everything else. That is, you are aware of this. It's an unhappy electorate. So anybody that's been around a long time is going to be treated skeptically by the voters. That in some ways you've been around longer than the incumbent governor. How do you make the case that you're the stronger candidate to defeat DeSantis and not Fried?
Because I think experience does matter. It absolutely does. I've been their governor before. I have fought for women's rights before. I worked across the aisle then with President Obama during the Great Recession to make sure we didn't have to fire 20,000 school teachers, defending them, accepting the $12 billion from the federal government to help Florida get out of that mess, to make sure that we still had law enforcement on the job, that we had firefighters on the job, and just did the right thing. In addition to that, I think it's important to note that when you're a public servant, you're supposed to serve with a servant's heart. Ron DeSantis doesn't have that servant's heart. It's almost as if he goes to bed every night, Chuck, thinking about who he can beat up on the next day, whether it's women and their right to choose, African Americans and their right to vote, seniors like my mother and father. My father's 90, my mother's 87, and their right to vote by mail. He's making that more difficult. The guy is literally anti-democracy. I'm a Democrat running to protect democracy. He's an autocrat wanting to be the dictator of America. He's not even here today. He's in Pennsylvania. He's in Ohio. Earlier in the week, he was in New Mexico. I believe he's really taken his eye off the ball because he has blind ambition for the White House. In fact, he cares more about the White House than the Floridians' house. We have a property insurance crisis in this state. He held a special session 1 month ago. It was special, all right, for the insurance companies. They made it harder for consumers to be able to get their money back from property insurance companies who were supposed to cover them. When I was governor, I had a special session on property insurance. And you know what I did? Lowered rates by 10%.
I'm going to end on the issue that I ended with Nikki Fried, and it's on abortion, but it's slightly different. Do you have any regrets of any of the judges you appointed that have ended up either upholding or overturning abortion rights legislation?
Well, yeah. I mean, people can disappoint you all the time. And when you're governor, you have like 3,000 appointments a year. Some of them are disappointed and some of them have not. And the one I'm most proud of, frankly, is the last one I appointed to the Florida Supreme Court. Justice James Perry from right here in Central Florida, African-American, wonderful man, was a great appointee. And I'm very proud of having made that historic appointment.
Do you ever regret not running for governor? You ran for governor in 2014 and you're running now. Do you wish you'd run in 2010 when it would have been for re-election?
No, and I'll tell you why. That was during the Great Recession, Chuck. And I remember where all the money was coming from was Washington. And I really felt in my heart and soul that I could do more for my Florida and our country by running for the U.S. Senate and helping more resources come to the Sunshine State to make sure we got out of that Great Recession that wasn't great at all. It was the right thing to do at the time. Just didn't turn out right at the time. Congressman
Charlie Crist, who represents, by the way, a district in the Tampa Bay area, also Democratic candidate for Florida governor. Thank you for coming on and sharing your perspective. Stay safe on the trail, sir.
Thank you, Chuck.
You got it.
Great to be with you.
You can catch our live coverage of Florida's election results and more on Tuesday night. We know there's some New York congressionals worth covering as well. We'll be doing our both Florida and New York on Meet the Press right here on NBC News Now. Coming up, midterm momentum and how the Trump factor is playing into races far beyond the state of Florida. Plus, tensions flare as extreme drought dries up water supply for millions of Americans, pushing western states to make major cutbacks. And guess what? They're starting to fight each other over it. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. As we said at the top of the hour, Donald Trump's lingering presence, despite his loss in 2020, is impacting just about everything in politics. And I feel like we're all living it and then some. There are now two politicians who have seen more of a boost from Trump's continued time on the political stage, I'd argue, than President Biden and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, both of whom are seeing their political fortunes prosper by essentially being seen as the Trump alternative. Joined now by my panel, Asma Khalid, White House correspondent for NPR, who's just come back from Florida, by the way, on a campaign reporting trip. Juanita Tolliver, NBC News political analyst. Brendan Buck, former communications advisor to House Speaker Paul Ryan, and NBC News senior national political reporter and a Florida-based reporter for us, Mark Caputo. Hello, all. All right. I'm going to do, before we get into sort of a national conversation, you cover Fried and Crist all the time. You've seen them back to back before. What'd you make of them?
On this show or on the campaign trail?
Yeah, no, I know what you think on the campaign trail. Listen to our podcast, and both you and I go off on this phrase. But what do you think of what we saw?
I mean, the reality is Charlie Crist is more polished when it comes to this stuff. Mm-hmm. But Nikki Fried, I think while she's a little more hearsed in her answer, has more of that kind of raw, non-politician energy that she gives out.
She seems to have found her sea legs. Is it too late?
I don't want to say too late. You don't want to forejudge a Florida election before it happens, but she needed a lot more money a lot earlier. Florida doesn't have election day. It has election days. Yeah. It goes for 30 days, and the preliminary polling had showed she was trailing by those early ballot casters by double digits because she wasn't on air.
And Charlie's been running for statewide office for so long, he knows how to do that.
Right. I
more
mean,
than most.
Yeah, since I had like brown hair.
Yeah.
He's been doing that. You know.
Asma, you just were in Pinellas County.
Yep,
and used to be Pinellas was the be-all, end-all. It's not quite. It's a little
Congressional
more.
maps have been redrawn, right?
Exactly. What did you take away? What did you learn?
Yeah, I mean, I went down there in part because, you look at polls and it seems like everybody is highly focused on inflation and the economy. And so I wanted to get a pulse of how that's actually translating. And one of the things I found out is I think, folks are definitely very frustrated, both Republicans and Democrats, by the economy. But I don't know that it's the primary motivating factor for how many folks will vote. A lot of people are angry on the right and the left. We could talk anger, I think, for different reasons. Yes. But, Democrats around reproductive rights. From Republicans, I heard a bit about Mar-a-Lago and the FBI raid. They are really motivating people. But look, I think ultimately we hear so much about inflation in polls, but I think the economy is somewhat of a baked-in proposition at this point.
All right, let me go to the larger thesis that I threw out here today. Brendan, I just think when you just look, Joe Biden's not in politics without Donald Trump anymore. He was retired from politics. Donald Trump essentially got him out of retirement and into the White House. Ron DeSantis was an unknown member of Congress who showed up on Fox News every once in a while. And then Donald Trump came along, and now he's if Donald Trump gets hit by a bus tomorrow, it's DeSantis as the front runner.
DeSantis is a bus driver.
The question the question I have, though, is Biden's worst days are when Trump's not standing next to him. Yeah. How will DeSantis look when Trump's not there?
Yeah, well, I buy the proposition that Joe Biden benefits from Donald Trump being on the stage. I think right now Ron DeSantis has been pushed aside recently by all of this. I mean, certainly the raid at Mar-a-Lago has rallied Republicans behind him. And Ron DeSantis has this unique ability so far to be Trumpy, but without really putting his arm around Trump. And it's hard to do, and I commend him for being able to do it. Do you think
this Mastriano decision is a smart one by him? Because I'm with you. I've been impressed how DeSantis can somehow be Trump adjacent and have people like you and others who don't like Trump going, I like this DeSantis guy.
It's because he acts like he's the leader of the party. He ignores that Donald Trump is actually the leader of the party, and he says, okay, well, there's a Republican running. I am the leader of the party. I'm going to help them get over there. And I think he's trying to build goodwill, and he certainly is banking on the sort of the far right to be there for him. I mean, every Republican right now is worried about the base, but he particularly is. So he's been very successful at it. Obviously, there are long-term risks associating yourself with an election denier like this, but so far he's managed to balance it okay.
And Juanita, look, I don't think it's an accident that the perception that Joe Biden is finding his sea legs comes at a time when Donald Trump is garnering the spotlight.
Garnering the spotlight and floundering in it, right? Investigation on investigation on investigation, to the point where the head of the Republican campaign committee is like, don't say his name. No one say his name. Stay away from him. He's toxic and he's bringing us down. But I do think that the reality check here that Democrats have going for them that we've seen over the past few weeks is passing consequential legislation. That's wildly popular. People tap into that. People are excited by that. People are going to feel something about that.
I mean, this is my criticism of the White House is they can't sell the policy.
They are investing and selling it. That has been a long-term problem for Democrats, right? We can all concede in that reality, but they are investing in it heavily. The $10 million coordinated ad campaign that's going out to key states. Planned Parenthood making sure that abortion is front and center on voters' mind, knowing how that is a galvanizing, mobilizing issue. I think that investments are being made to make sure that this drumbeat is hitting through November 8th.
All right, let me add to the skepticism, and it sounds like you're there too, which is, when have we ever seen voters reward? They don't vote to reward. They vote because
they vote out of anger.
You're so negative. So negative.
I mean, the Inflation Reduction Act, I think, look, there's also a bit of cynicism I heard from voters, especially on the right, who will say, well, look, is this bill or this law now actually going to really help inflation? And economic experts will say in the short term, it's not going to do that. So it's a bit of a...
It's a good climate bill, but I don't know how that
But think
inflation.
about the message here where Democrats can say Republicans voted against capping insulin costs at $35. Republicans voted against climate mitigation efforts when we're experiencing droughts, historic floods, historic storms. All of that messaging ties in here.
I don't know that they're going to get rewarded, but Democrats were facing a crisis where their own party was just going to stay home in a midterm when it's all about turning out your base. So now they at least have something to work with. I don't know that the middle is going to, I don't think it's going to save the House, but at least they have something to work with.
Well, the other thing is, one of the things that caused Biden's collapse, outside of inflation, I know that's like, aside from that, how was the play, Mrs. Lincoln, right? Outside of inflation, outside of Afghanistan, there was this prolonged period of losing in Washington. The left was at war with the left, Democrats with Democrats. He notched a win. Yes, Republicans will tell you, oh, this is the most terrible bill in the world, blah, blah. But the reality is he came out of this as a win. Now, Trump's raid at Mar-a-Lago, or the FBI's raid at Mar-a-Lago, I guess we're not allowed to use the word raid anymore, apparently, whatever we call it. The FBI storming the gates.
They paid to sponsor this program. We're not using raid.
But the reality is, like, that has kind of blotted out the sun. But in the end, like, Biden's got something to talk about, and he can say, look, I won this, we did something, here are all the goodies. Will people really feel it and reward him? I don't know. But he doesn't look like a loser.
No,
right?
and the climate portions, I mean, I will say this, a lot of his support has completely plummeted because of the support from young voters.
You know, it's interesting. I'm going to give away a little something from our poll that we're going to come out on Sunday, but this issue with Democrats just being disappointed in Biden, he's still under 80% job approval among Democrats. If he moves it to 85, his job rating will go to 45 without winning over a single independent voter.
Right.
And 45% is suddenly, doesn't seem, that's about where Trump was in 18.
And if Biden gets to 45, imagine how well Democratic candidates who are already outperforming him in polls at the local and statewide level will be positioned. They're in a great position right now. McConnell knows it. Trump knows it. Everybody running, expecting, who, let's be real, started the year really giddy about midterms because they assume Republicans have it in the bag.
And that's the other big headline that this poll's going to show, and I think it's obvious to everybody here. Brendan, we're headed for an unprecedented turnout. Right, you look at, and we just have seen it in raw numbers. Look at Kansas, showed you the animation on the abortion issue. But look what Wyoming showed us in the animation of supporting Trump. And you see these numbers in separate places. Women are more fired up about this election than men. Rural voters have never been more excited about voting. And it feels to be a Trump issue. Everybody's pissed.
Yeah, and we've talked about this before. If you ask,
different reasons.
If you ask any Republican, they feel really good. But the one thing that they're nervous is, once again, Donald Trump is not actually on the ballot. And what does that look like? And so they have to find ways to fire people up, culture wars and IRS agents and things like that. That's the little thing that's in the back of their head, the one thing where they're not ready to spike the football yet.
Except the enthusiasm already seems to be there. I mean, the persuadables may be smaller, but they are still relevant here. And these are folks that really have vacillated back and forth, and they don't like any incumbent.
Right, well, swing voters swing, right? But I think to Brennan's point, or to kind of answer an unasked question about DeSantis and Mastriano, that's about evangelical voters. It's not about Trump, right? Like, DeSantis is courting them with his talk about gender. Like, that's a big issue. And
but he's afraid of abortion. I've noticed has he clammed up on abortion.
He's cautious. He's cautious about it. Yeah, I mean.
Do you think that tone changes if he wins re-election?
Oh, definitely.
So do I.
You watch the spring lawmaking session in a non-election year in Florida begins.
We're looking at 8 weeks.
Tuesday in March. Yeah, you watch what happens. Like right after, like it may be right, in November, late November. Watch what happens.
But he does seem to be, Asma, aware that that's a bit of a rail that he ought to be careful with for his re-election.
He could push.
He has not pushed for it.
He hasn't pushed.
He's talking voter fraud right now.
Yeah.
That's what he's
doing. I mean, it's a 15-week ban. And right now, when I was down there, I interviewed an OBGYN who told me that, folks who are coming into clinics are really riled up. And they'll ask her, what can I do? And she'll say, vote, get everybody to vote. And so there is a sense that this issue, I mean, we saw this with Kansas, that Republicans are nervous, I think, about all right, total bans and what that might mean, or bans at conception.
I'm curious. Brendan, if you were a Senate Republican, how would you feel about Mitch McConnell saying what he said publicly? Were you supposed to say the quiet part out loud when it comes to candidate quality?
I mean, look, we've all been saying it, right? We've been talking about this.
We've had a Herschel Walker conversation for months, and it's not just Herschel we're talking about it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, everything he said was obviously true. So, it's that you get in trouble for saying what's true. Yeah, candidates matter. And he has long been someone who tried to get invested in primaries to get the right candidate. In this cycle, the Trump side just worked him and ended up with a slate that people he didn't want. It's probably going to cost him the Senate majority, and that's just remarkable.
Does that rally donors, or does that scare donors off, what he said?
It probably wakes them up, but it doesn't sound like they're short on money. Investing $28 million in Ohio, the money is there.
That's McConnell's money. Remember, the Republican Senate Campaign Committee pulled out millions in ad buys from Pennsylvania,
it's all McConnell's
Arizona.
Money.
Okay.
It's all McConnell's money.
But at the end of the day, Juanita, if they're in Ohio, it does look like, by the way, the most interesting thing about DeSantis' schedule is that he's not campaigning with Dr. Oz. He is going to campaign in Ohio with J.D. Vance. He's going to campaign in Pennsylvania with Mastriano. And what that tells me is that...
He hates crudités.
Well, nobody likes a good veggie. He loves a veggie powder, but not that. What that really tells me is I do think Republicans are going to cut Oz loose.
Republicans said that in the primary. They said if Trump endorses Oz, then he's dead to us. That's what we're hearing from county Republican officials who are in charge of the mobilization on the ground, who are directly engaged with voters. And so this, no surprise that DeSantis is not touching Oz.
Well, not only that, I'm sure Mitch McConnell will say, you got plenty of money. You don't need us. You can write a check.
Yeah, well, that's one of the frustrations that some of the Republicans and, the upper echelons had with Oz is you had an opponent who was literally in the hospital. And
what did you do?
What you did is you acted as if your campaign was in the hospital. Like his campaign did. Well, we could make a Jersey joke. I won't because I'm from Florida.
Yeah.
But the reality is he did nothing at that point to seize the initiative.
Yeah.
And now, a lot of races are decided this time of year. Who knows?
Asma, one last question about the White House. Do they really put Biden out there a lot? Or if Trump's going to be out there stumping the country, they say, you know what? Have at it, man. This worked for us in 2020. Why not do it again?
As of now, we hear that Biden's going to go out, right? We hear that the White House is real eager to sell this Inflation Reduction Act. It is billed. There is a sense that they think that this is a legislative win, and it's worth it to get the president out there. But I will say at the same time, there is no doubt amongst Democrats that their base gets energized by Donald Trump. And the more he is out that area,
Brendan is right that they need Trump on the ballot to get Trump voters out. He is literally the definition of double-edged sword, though. Asma, Juanita, Brendan, and Mark, thank you. This was a great panel. I'd like to dump the rest of the show and keep going. Up next, Western water wars. Arizona officials push back on a new round of drastic reductions in water supply. My next guest will explain why they're pushing back. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. This 23-year mega-drought that has taken place in the Southwest, the impacts of climate change and the scarcity of water in the region are topics we've been covering here at Meet the Press for quite some time. In fact, we took a deep dive into the dire situation facing the Colorado River and the nation's two largest water reservoirs on an episode of Meet the Press Reports last season. Now that shortage has gotten worse. Lake Mead and Lake Powell are only a quarter full, and their water levels are expected to continue dropping. You can see how much Lake Mead has already dropped over the past 2 decades. Look at these NASA images, okay? On the left, the lake levels in the year 2000. And on the right, the view of the lake's vastly shrunken shoreline this year. That doesn't count all the jokes about all the bodies being found that are older and older and older as the water levels go down. On Tuesday, the government announced new emergency water cuts for states along the Colorado River. The U.S. Bureau of Reclamation declared a Tier 2 shortage for Lake Mead for the first time, after the 7 states that rely on this river failed to meet a deadline to come up with a water conservation plan. As a result, Arizona, Nevada, and parts of Mexico will see an increase in water restrictions. Arizona is facing the steepest cuts. Its annual water allocation will be reduced by 21% beginning in January. And this may not surprise you. That is not going over well with folks in Arizona. Joining me now is Ted Cook. He's the general manager of the Central Arizona Project, which delivers water to 80% of the state's population. So, given that he suddenly has to figure out what to do with less, he leads an agency that's not happy. Mr. Cook, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me. Good afternoon.
Explain to me why you feel as if this is a situation the states couldn't come to agree to. We know the federal government stepped in. Why do you believe and I know we have a bit of a frozen issue here. I hope you could still hear me. Why do you believe this was unfair? All right, we're going to sneak in a quick break and try to fix our connection. Mr. Cook, we will see you in a second. Oh, never mind. We've got you back. I hope you heard my question. Shorter version. Why was it unfair?
Well, it's there's a little bit, I think, of confusion. The announcement that the United States made on Tuesday and the cuts that you showed on the graphic a moment ago, 21% cut to Arizona, much smaller numbers to Nevada and Mexico. This was a result of the agreements that are already in place. This was going to happen no matter what. Arizona can look back and say, maybe we should not have made the agreement to take that large of a cut, but that is water under the bridge, not to make a pun. Where Arizona is disappointed is that what the United States did not say on Tuesday was that we also have a plan to do additional cuts to deal with the situation in the lake that you are showing right now. And the Colorado River Basin states have been working very hard on that. But the expectation has been that any additional cuts that we take, Arizona will continue to take those large disproportionate cuts. And that is something that we are not going to accept. And that's why we're unhappy is we don't regret necessarily having to take this level of cuts already, but taking more at this level, which really needs to be done. But we're not able to or willing to take additional cuts in this proportion, particularly with California not taking any.
Well, the California issue has to do with the fact that it does seem as if agricultural land is being prioritized. Is that a mistake?
Well, I don't know if I'd call it a mistake. And agricultural use in California has the highest priority in that state. So what's coming into play is basically the date in time in which various uses were put under contract with the United States. And agriculture in California is one of the earliest uses and therefore has the highest priority. And the result, therefore, is they feel that they should be cut last. And so cities in Arizona and also in California will be reduced before farms will be cut back. And farms will fill a very important function in the United States. Here in Arizona, our Yuma area produces the vast proportion of winter vegetables that not just the United States but the world consumes. But the farms also grow lots of stuff that could be grown somewhere else.
Let me ask you this. I fear that we're going to see more of these state versus state issues. How much should each state be either penalized if they're trying to reduce water consumption? Are they creating the conditions to make it easier to conserve water? Whether it's, not having grass lawns, which I know is a movement certainly out west, things like that. Should that be factored in on how much, if you're trying harder to conserve water, should you have your cuts be less, say, to the federal government? Should that be a bit of a quid pro quo, if you will?
Yeah, I think that type of thing comes into play, and many water users across the desert Southwest are doing those types of things. Typically, that is done at the local level, at the city or town level, and I doubt that the U.S. is going to get involved at that level. One of the other considerations that was missing in the announcement on Tuesday was that the United States itself is not prepared to take action of its own. In other words, to force some of these reductions, and are relying on a voluntary approach where users will come up, usually for money, and say, well, I will cut my water back if I get paid this much. Our experience is a voluntary approach is not going to respond in the way that we need.
Do you think we got to price this? I mean, it sounds like you're describing as pricing carbon, right? When we talk about carbon, do you think access to water, that maybe one way to reduce use is to tax it?
That would be one way. I think that would be very difficult. Probably, in my mind, the most efficient way to get to where we need to get to is have the United States to impose reductions on users. They can do things that you've suggested, such as establish efficiency standards for both use and agricultural use. One thing that needs to be done that has not been done is to allocate evaporation and losses. There's a huge amounts of water that's lost every year from evaporation and losses, but that doesn't get applied to any of these contracts to take water. The United States could do that tomorrow if they wanted to. Probably people would take it to court, but this is some leadership that I think we need from the United States.
Well, look, I think you're at the tip of the spear of what is going to only become more of a political hot potato as the decade and as climate change impacts us, all of us more. Ted Cook of the Central Arizona Project, really appreciate you coming on and sharing your views with us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
After the break, Ukraine and Russia are accusing each other of plotting a false flag operation in Europe's largest nuclear facility. Putin playing games with nukes again. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. There are new concerns today about the safety and security of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, the largest nuclear facility in Europe. It's also on the front lines of the war in Ukraine. Russia and Ukraine are accusing each other of planning a false flag event at the plant. Ukraine's President Zelensky warned late yesterday that the world is on the verge of a nuclear disaster. The warning comes as Russia's defense spokesperson claimed that Ukraine was planning a provocative action around the nuclear facility as the UN Secretary General visits the country. Russia has also threatened to shut down the plant, blaming Ukrainian shelling around the facility. But a spokesman for Ukrainian's military intelligence tells NBC News that Russia told nuclear workers at the plant not to show up to work today, adding that this may be evidence of Russia preparing for a large-scale provocation at the facility today. What's the truth? Well, I'm joined now by our NBC News correspondent, Josh Letterman, who's in Dnipro and is doing the best he can to get us some of the facts here. Josh, what do you know?
Well, Chuck, it's approaching midnight here in Ukraine, and so far we haven't seen any reports of explosions or other incidents at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. So that's the good news. But no one, I can tell you, in this region is breathing easily right now, given the fact that both Ukraine and Russia have been predicting some type of an incident at the plant. Both have been having nuclear disaster drills, practicing in full hazmat suits, how they would clear radiation if there were an incident. And we know that today President Putin spoke on the phone with President Macron of France about this very situation. Afterwards, there was a rare point of agreement between both of those countries, saying that Russia had agreed in that phone call to allow UN inspectors to visit the site, inspectors from the International Atomic Energy Agency. But the real question is, when will they be allowed to go, and will it be soon enough to avert a potential catastrophe, Chuck?
Well, I saw that Vladimir Putin was playing a little bit of this nuclear game in his call with Emmanuel Macron. So clearly this appears to be a little bit of a PR stunt, but who knows? Josh Letterman on the ground for us. Josh, thank you. And please, as always, stay safe. Still to come, Oregon's gubernatorial race it's not about to become, it is a three-way contest. Meet independent candidate Betsy Johnson. She's going to join me next. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. In the age of polarization, I'm always very intrigued when we see an attempt to essentially run up the middle. It's a three-way race to be the next governor of Oregon. Earlier this week, independent candidate Betsy Johnson submitted the signatures she needs to put herself on November's ballot. Johnson is a former Democratic state senator. She delivered over 48,000 signatures. It's more than double what she needed to get her name on the ballot. Assuming her signatures are verified, she'll join Democrat Tina Kotek, a former Speaker of the Oregon House of Representatives, and Republican Christine Drazen, the former Minority Leader of the Oregon House, on the ballot. Three very experienced candidates will be running for governor. Johnson has already outraised both of her competitors. She's brought in over $7 million in campaign contributions in 2022, and nearly $2 million of that has come from perhaps Oregon's most famous businessman, Nike co-founder Phil Knight. Yesterday, the election predictor Larry Sabato moved his rating of the Oregon governor's race from lean Democrat to toss-up. So let's meet the independent candidate for Oregon governor, Betsy Johnson. She joins me now. State Senator Johnson, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
So let me start with this. You used to be a Democrat. Did you leave the party or did the party leave you?
Well, I used to be a Republican, too, and in both cases, the party left me.
So say that. Why did you join the Democrats at the time, and how did the Democrats leave you?
The Democrats left me with an agenda that disrespected and wanted to defund the police. The Democrats left me with an agenda that was, in my view, out of sync with Oregonians. We had days of riots and disruption in downtown Portland. I just simply refuse to sit back and watch a state that I love go to hell in a handbasket. Our downtown has turned into 10 cities. I am of the opinion that the state has never been more divided. The Oregonians are very distrustful of the radical right, and they are terrified of the progressive left. And it was simply time to say there's got to be a better way that unites Oregonians. Oregon is a toss-up now because Oregonians are frustrated with what our current governor and my opponent, Tina Kotek, as Speaker of the House, have done to the place.
What do you believe they've done wrong? I want to get to the city of Portland in a second, because one could argue, is that on the mayor or is that on the state? But specifically on Governor Brown, and you're wanting to link her to the Democratic nominee, Tina Kotek, what do you believe they could have done differently here?
Well, one of them is to not allow or forbear the 10 cities that have grown up in Portland. I am the only one that I believe can clean up the 10 cities, protect a woman's right to choose. Downtown has become extremely dirty, graffiti-ridden. There are tents on every corner. We have not prosecuted aggressively or made much of an effort to clean this up. Tina Kotek passed a bill that makes it more difficult to remove the tents. And I think that we've got to clean up Portland. Portland is Oregon cannot succeed if Portland fails. And right now, Portland is failing by a lot of measures. And I feel very strongly that getting Portland cleaned up is one of the primary things we need to do.
Why are you the better person to shake things up rather than the Republican nominee? I know Oregon hasn't had a Republican governor since the 80s. Why isn't it time for that?
Well, I don't think Oregonians are going to elect the first pro-life governor in Oregon's history just months after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. And frankly, if I were not in the race at this point, it would be Tina Kotek. If you have the standard partisan polarized politics, Oregon continues to be blue and continues to lean Democratic. And I just don't think that Oregonians are ready to elect a pro-life governor.
If you weren't running, who would you be supporting? Would abortion be the issue that would decide it?
Abortion is a bedrock value for me, but I am running, so I'm not going to speculate on who I would support were I not in the race. I'm in this race to win it and become Oregon's next governor.
Let's talk about the city of Portland. What can you do as governor to clean the place up? Because frankly, you're right. People go and visit, and you're sort of overwhelmed by the 10 cities, and it's surprising because there's this feeling that Oregon is such a very livable place.
Well, Oregon is a livable place. We've got several problems. We can't be livable if we're not affordable. But to go back to your question and ask what a governor can do to help clean this place up, use the governor's office as the bully pulpit to call out the problem. I think in many cases we suffer from what I'm going to characterize as Portland polite. We have talked about tent cities as an emergency, but we haven't had the requisite urgency under fixing it. I would, if I'm elected the next governor, and I believe I will be, immediately convene the interested parties that could come together to begin work on this problem. It would be public safety, it would be social services, it would be mental health services. Assign tasks with deadlines and measurables, get a budget that accompanies it, cause people to be accountable for those deliverables. And if those folks don't deliver, get new folks. I've been involved personally in repurposing an abandoned state building and turning it into a place of recovery and refuge and reentry. So I know that it can be done. This facility was a former prison. It's now been completely rehabbed and is working to provide both emergency shelter on one half of the operation and long-term recovery on the other half.
Betsy Johnson, this has been a fascinating interview. I wish I had more time to spend more time with you. I plan to invite you back. Independent candidate for governor, a fascinating race. You're not a typical left-right politician, which I think a lot of people are intrigued about these days. Thanks for coming on and sharing your perspective with us.
Thank you. I'll come back if you ask me.
You got it. We'll be back Monday with more Meet the Press Now. And if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press on your local NBC News station. Among my guests, the man charged with keeping the House in Democratic Party hands. It's New York Democratic Congressman Sean Patrick Maloney. We also have a brand new NBC News poll that will be debuting